Probably the number one question I get asked is how I got into etiquette. And I think it's a great question. So if you'll indulge me for just a couple of minutes, I'll tell you the story. While in high school, I had a friend who was very involved in politics. And once in a while, she'd let me tag along to certain events. Once in a while, there was a meal involved. And I watched how people were eating, and I had never really seen that or learned that before. It was very proper. They sat a certain way. They knew what utensils to use. And I stared looking at the table in horror, thinking, what do I do? But aha, I'll just watch them. When in doubt, that's your answer. As time went on, I ended up in New York City, where I lived for 12 years. Wonderful years. Greatest memories of my life. And on top of some other things that I did there, I became a talent coordinator for a modeling agency. I got to handle children and adults for commercials and movies. As I watched the children, I noticed that the same ones got called back, and we call them callbacks, for the roles. And I kept looking at them as they were sitting in my office, saying, what do they have in common? Well, it was there. I deemed it the it factor, which now a lot of people use. I'm not saying I was the creator of it, but I have always called it the it factor. They sat a certain way with really good posture. Their eyes were direct contact and intent. They listened and didn't interrupt and took instructions. So when a casting director would call me back, they would say, Timothy was great on set. He took directions beautifully. We'll be using him a lot from now on. That was it. That was sometimes why you would see a 25-year-old playing the part of a 15-year-old if they had a youthful face, because they had the maturity that was needed for the role, but the face that could get away with that age, which is a blessing. I began to write about the it factor. I talked about the it factor, and a light bulb went off one day, and I said, this is what I love. And I started to write my curriculum. I just held on to it. And as something popped into my head, I started to write it again, and I started to read. And I've always been someone who loves to travel, so I've traveled around the world, and I've dined in 3-star restaurants, and I've watched the people around me, and I learned. I do what I do because I absolutely love it. I don't teach people to be pretentious, try to turn you into something that you aren't. It's only to enhance you, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's to prevent embarrassment. When you are seated at in a formal dining setting and you really don't know which way to go, there's so many easy tips to help you with that. I've been so blessed. I've worked with inner city kids. I've worked with migrant kids. I've worked with some of the wealthiest of the wealthy on Palm Beach Island. I have worked with celebrities and athletes. We're all the same. We're all in search of becoming better. I don't love one more than the other. So from my kitchen table, finally, one day, I said, I have to do something with this, and Palm Beach Etiquette was born. So I hope you enjoy my tips as we go along, and I'm always open to suggestions, because if you ask me a question, most likely I have it already written somewhere in my curriculum. I've been doing this for somewhere between 15 and 17 years. I'm trying to think back as to when I formed my company. I should know that, but I don't, and I just love it. Have a polite day.